The Galactic Empire stretched across the stars like a shining net. Thousands of worlds, each with their own cities, rivers, mountains, and skies, lived under the rule of the Empire. Traders carried goods from system to system. Ships with glowing engines crossed dark space like sparks on water. Everywhere, order was maintained by law and the great fleets of the Imperial Navy. To many, it seemed the Empire would last forever. Yet on every map, no matter how large or small, one section of space stood apart. It was not colored like the rest. Instead, it was marked with a sharp red line. Words in bold letters were always written across it: Forbidden Zone, Terran Space. For generations, officers, explorers, and students in the academies had been told the same lesson. No vessel, military or civilian, was to enter the zone. The reason was never explained in detail. Commanders only said, the Terrans must not be disturbed. In the imperial capital, many thought of the warning as little more than a tradition. Some called it superstition, a story kept alive by the old council to scare young pilots. Others said the warning came from ancient treaties signed long ago, though the actual records had been lost. Whatever the truth, the red-marked region remained untouched. The stars there were quiet. No signals came from inside. No merchant routes passed through. It was as if the space itself belonged to silence. But silence always stirs curiosity. Across the Empire, younger officers sometimes whispered about the mystery. What had the Terrans done to earn such fear and respect? Were they still alive in that hidden zone, or had they vanished long ago? No one could say. Libraries held fragments of old records that mentioned humans, but the words were faded and broken. One text spoke of a people of endless will. Another described builders who walked where no others dared. Nothing more was clear. On a distant border station, Commander Vey studied the maps late at night. His quarters were filled with the glow of star charts and navigation lines. His eyes always rested on the red boundary. While other officers dismissed the mystery, Vey felt it calling him. He had climbed the ranks quickly and wanted to be remembered as more than another commander. Discovering the truth about Terran space would make his name echo across the Empire. He often asked older admirals what they knew, but they gave only vague answers. Some shook their heads and refused to speak. A few grew pale and told him to forget his questions. Their silence only sharpened his hunger for answers. The Empire at this time was proud but restless. Trade wars and disputes among noble houses filled the council with arguments. Many believed the Empire had grown too large, too soft, and too cautious. They believed that daring actions were needed to remind the people that the Navy still carried the spirit of discovery. To him, crossing the forbidden line would not be an act of rebellion. It would be a gift to history. Stories drifted through the lower ranks as well. Some said the Terrans were ghosts, long gone from their worlds, leaving behind only ruins. Others imagined they were hiding treasures of technology and power, waiting for someone brave enough to claim them. To young officers and restless crews, these tales sounded like promises. The unknown always carries a strange kind of light, and many were ready to follow anyone bold enough to chase it. The maps showed the forbidden region as empty space, but they did not believe it. He imagined hidden planets, forgotten stations, and relics of an ancient people. He thought of glory and medals, of halls filled with applause as his discoveries were revealed to the council. More than once, he told himself the warning was nothing more than fear dressed as wisdom. As days passed, his decision formed like a shadow growing darker each night. He would take his fleet across the line. He would uncover what the Empire had hidden for centuries. He would be the first to walk where no officer had dared. When he stood before his crew in the command hall, he did not speak of defiance. Instead, he spoke of honor and exploration. His voice was strong and clear. He told them the maps were wrong to hide stars behind a red mark. He said the Empire needed leaders who dared to look beyond silence. His words lit a fire in their hearts. The promise of discovery is a powerful flame, and soon every officer aboard his ships was ready to follow him. Far beyond the capital, beyond the trade lanes and shining colonies, the Forbidden Zone waited. Its stars burned quietly, just as they had for ages. No ships moved there, no signals crossed the black. To most of the galaxy, it was nothing but an empty patch of darkness. To Commander Vey and his fleet, it was a door waiting to be opened. And soon, the silence would be broken. The fleet gathered in quiet formation, far from the busy star lanes of the Empire. 10 ships with silver hulls reflected the faint light of distant suns. They were not the Empire's largest vessels, but each was swift, disciplined, and strong in design. Their crews had been handpicked by Commander Vey himself. To them, he was not only a leader but a figure of daring courage. The journey to the edge of the Forbidden Zone had taken weeks. Each day, the red boundary on the maps grew larger, like a wall painted across the stars. The charts displayed warnings again and again. Imperial code lit up in flashing letters: entry forbidden. Severe penalty for violation. But no patrols followed them. The Empire had long trusted its own fear to guard the line. Inside the command ship, the air was tense. Officers spoke in careful voices, eyes moving often to the main screen where the border shimmered in red. Some whispered that they were not only breaking law but also awakening something unknown. Others reminded themselves of Vey's words. Discovery always begins with courage. Commander Vey stood at the center of the hall, his hands clasped behind his back. His face carried no sign of doubt. For years, he had dreamed of this moment, and now the silence of Terran space lay only minutes ahead. He turned to his crew and spoke in a steady voice. "The Empire has grown afraid of shadows," he said. "But we are not children to be frightened by old stories. Terran space is only stars, no different than the ones we already cross. We will go forward with discipline, with unity, and with the honor of the fleet." The words settled into the room like a flame spreading through cold air. Officers lifted their heads. Their eyes shone with the same fire he carried. The countdown to the border began. Every screen displayed the distance as numbers ticking away. A quiet hum filled the ship as engines shifted into precise alignment. Outside, the stars seemed to hold their breath. When the final number reached 0, the fleet crossed the invisible line. There was no wall, no storm, no sudden strike from hidden weapons. The ships glided smoothly into the black. Yet the moment carried weight, as if the stars themselves watched in silence. The first hours were filled with study. Scanners swept the region. Pilots charted the nearest systems. Reports came back with strange results. The stars here appeared older, their light softer. No signals of trade or travel reached their sensors. No stations or colonies could be found. It was as though the space had been empty for ages. At first, relief spread among the crews. Perhaps the warnings truly were nothing more than tales. Perhaps Terran space was nothing but forgotten dust. But soon, unease grew. The silence felt deeper than normal. Even the hum of their own engines seemed louder than it should. A young officer remarked that the blackness outside appeared heavier, as if watching them back. Another swore the stars seemed to flicker in patterns that were not random. Vey dismissed these words. He ordered his crew to continue forward. "Silence is only silence," he reminded them. "Do not give fear the shape of ghosts." The fleet advanced farther. They entered a system with 3 planets circling a dim star. The planets were barren and gray, without seas or clouds. Yet as their ships moved closer, scanners detected traces of metal beneath the dust. Long lines and buried shapes hinted at structures hidden below the surface. The crews murmured in awe. These were no natural patterns. Something had been built here long ago. Perhaps a city, perhaps machines larger than any they had seen. The readings were faint, but the evidence was clear. Vey felt his heart quicken. Proof at last. Terran space was not empty. It held history, perhaps even power waiting to be uncovered. He ordered the fleet to orbit the largest planet. Teams prepared to send probes. But before the probes could be launched, a signal touched their ships. It was not loud. It was not hostile. It was a simple pulse, repeating at steady intervals. The sound moved through their systems like a calm heartbeat. The officers froze. The scanners showed no ship, no station, no visible source. The pulse seemed to come from the very fabric of the space around them. For the first time, even Vey felt a flicker of doubt. He leaned closer to the screen, listening to the rhythm. It was not random. It was deliberate. Someone, or something, had noticed their arrival. He turned to his officers. Do not fear this. It is only a message. Terran space has spoken, and we will answer. The crews exchanged uneasy looks. They had crossed the boundary, broken the law, and entered the silence. Now the silence was answering back. The pulse did not stop. It echoed again and again, steady as a clock. Each beat moved through the hulls of the ships, soft yet firm, like the tap of a hand on glass. The crews gathered around their consoles, listening in silence. The sound was not loud, but it carried weight, as though every strike held meaning. Commander Vey stood tall in the command hall, his eyes fixed on the main screen. His first thought was that the pulse might be a warning, a signal designed to scare them away. Yet the tone of it was calm, almost welcoming. It reminded him of a door being knocked on, waiting for someone to answer. He gave the order to record and analyze the pattern. Officers worked quickly, feeding the data through scanners and decoders. The results were confusing. The rhythm was far too regular to be natural, yet it was not like any language the Empire knew. No symbols, no words, no familiar code. Only sound and time, repeating with flawless precision. As the minutes passed, the atmosphere inside the ship grew heavier. The officers shifted in their seats, whispering in low voices. Some believed the pulse came from buried machines on the planet. Others suggested it might be a leftover beacon from an ancient age. A few felt certain it was a sign of something alive. Vey silenced the debate. It does not matter what form it takes, he said. What matters is that we have found proof. Terran space is not empty. Something here remembers. His words stirred both pride and fear. Discovery had been their goal, and discovery had come, but it carried a weight they had not expected. The fleet remained in orbit, watching the barren world below. Dust storms moved across its surface like gray rivers. Mountains rose sharp against the horizon. Yet the scanners kept showing faint traces of metal deep beneath the crust, long lines stretching for miles. They looked like roads, or perhaps veins of a sleeping giant. Then the pulse changed. At first, it slowed, as if pausing to think. Then it grew faster, more complex, weaving into new rhythms. Lights flickered on the control panels of every ship. Screens displayed waves of motion that shaped into strange patterns. The message was evolving. Officers leaned forward, eyes wide. It is speaking, one whispered. It is trying to speak to us. The crews worked harder, sending probes to scan the surface. The probes descended through thin air and landed on the dusty plains. The ground was covered with stone and metal fragments, half buried by time. When the probes transmitted their images back, the officers stared in awe. The ruins were not random. Towers had once stood here, taller than any city of the Empire. Roads stretched straight to the horizon. Platforms as wide as lakes lay broken but not forgotten. The planet had once carried a civilization, powerful and vast. And at the heart of it all, deep beneath the crust, something still lived. The probes detected energy readings far below the surface. A buried core, vast and still active, pulsed with the same rhythm as the signal. Whatever it was, it had survived the ages, waiting for someone to arrive. Vey felt a thrill course through him. He had dreamed of glory, of finding treasures hidden by time. Now the dream was real. "Prepare a landing team," he ordered. "We will see this with our own eyes." But before the teams could launch, the ships themselves began to shake. Not with violence, but with a steady hum that grew stronger each second. Outside the windows, the blackness of space shifted. Shadows moved across the stars, shapes so faint they seemed like illusions. Then the shadows took form. Gigantic structures revealed themselves, floating silently in orbit above the planet. They had been invisible at first, hidden by technology beyond the Empire's understanding. But the pulse had awakened them. Now their vast outlines shimmered into view. The crews gasped. Towers of metal stretched across the void, linked by glowing lines. Some looked like colossal rings turning slowly in silence. Others resembled wings, wide and radiant, reflecting the faint light of the star. Together they formed a network that wrapped the planet like a crown. One officer whispered in awe, "This is not a ruin. This is a guardian." The hum grew louder. Lights sparked to life across the structures, running like rivers of fire along their edges. The Empire's ships, once proud in their silver shine, looked small and fragile beside these awakening giants. They gripped the edge of the command platform. His heart pounded, but his voice remained calm. "We have found their watch," he said. "This is what the warning was meant to hide." The pulse shifted again, and this time it was no longer only sound. It became light. Streams of brightness rippled across the screens, painting shapes and figures. It was a language of patterns, made not with words but with harmony. The Terrans, or whatever they had left behind, were speaking in a way deeper than voice. The crews sat frozen, staring at the glowing designs. They felt as if the space around them had opened its eyes. The silence of ages had ended, and the guardians of Terran space had awakened. For the first time since crossing the line, Commander Vey felt the full weight of his choice. The Empire had been warned, and now he understood why. The Terrans had not vanished. They had only been waiting. The fleet floated in silence as the great structures around the planet came alive. Lights rippled across the vast rings and towers in slow, steady waves, like a heartbeat made of stars. Every ship in Commander Vey's fleet trembled under the soft hum that filled the void. The sound was not harsh, not threatening, yet it carried power that could not be denied. The crews watched the display in awe. None of them had ever seen technology so old and yet so perfect. These machines had slept for ages, and with a single signal they had awakened as if no time had passed. Commander Vey stood firm on the command deck. His eyes were fixed on the screen, but his mind raced. This was not the treasure he had expected. It was greater and heavier. The Terrans had left behind guardians that even the Empire's strongest ships could not match. Yet he told himself that discovery was still victory. History would remember his name. The signal of light grew more complex. At first, it had been waves of brightness moving in rhythm. Now it formed shapes and patterns. Circles opened and closed. Lines stretched and curved. The officers whispered to one another, unsure if this was art, code, or speech. Suddenly, one of the giant rings above the planet shifted. Slowly, with grace rather than force, it turned in space. From its center, a glow began to gather. It was soft at first, like the shimmer of a distant moon. Then it brightened until every sensor on the fleet lit up with alarms. Energy was building in a way no Imperial ship had ever recorded. Before fear could take hold, the glow released. A single beam of light stretched outward, not in attack but in formation. From the beam, a shape began to appear. A ship. It was smaller than the Empire's command vessel, yet it carried presence greater than the entire fleet. Its hull was simple, almost plain, built of dark metal with lines that curved like flowing water. No weapon arrays were visible, no banners, no markings of power. But as it drifted closer, every crew member felt the weight of its arrival. The pulse stopped. The humming faded. Silence filled the space once more. Then, without warning, the screens aboard every Imperial ship lit up with a single image. A man stood before them. His face was calm, his eyes steady. His clothing was simple, not the grand robes of an admiral or the armor of a soldier. He looked more like a traveler who had walked far and chosen to rest. His voice came next, clear and gentle, carried through every channel at once. "You have crossed into Terran space." The words were plain, but they filled the halls with an echo that felt older than empires. The crews held their breath. No translation device had been used, yet the man's voice reached them in perfect speech they could understand. Commander Vey stepped forward. "I am Vey of the Galactic Empire. We come to explore." "Who speaks to us?" The man inclined his head. "I am Aaron. I speak for those who remain." Vey studied the figure. He did not look like a ruler. He did not look like a warrior. Yet something about him made the command hall feel smaller, as if the presence of one Terran filled more space than an entire fleet. "We seek knowledge," Vey said carefully. "The Empire honors discovery. We wish to learn what lies within this zone." Aaron's gaze did not waver. "The Empire was warned long ago. Terran space is forbidden to protect both you and us. Why did you cross?" There was no anger in his voice, no threat. Yet the question pressed heavily on Vey's shoulders. He chose his words with care. "The Empire grows restless. Curiosity cannot be chained forever. I believed the warning to be fear without reason. I wished to see the truth." For a long moment, Aaron was silent. Behind him, the image of the Terran ship drifted in the black, calm as a shadow on water. Then Aaron spoke again. "You have seen the first layer of truth. The Guardians have awakened because you entered. This place is not empty. It remembers, and it watches. You were told to stay away, not because of myth, but because the weight of this knowledge is greater than many can bear." The words spread unease through the crews. Officers shifted in their seats, glancing toward their commander. For the first time, some began to wonder if their daring had brought not glory but judgment. Vey held his ground. "If knowledge exists, it should not remain hidden. The Empire has strength. We can carry this weight." Aaron's eyes softened, almost with sadness. "Strength is not the same as readiness. Many empires have thought as you do. Few have endured." The lights on the ancient structures pulsed again, gentle now, like a steady breath. Aaron raised his hand, and the lights on every Imperial screen dimmed slightly, as though the entire fleet was being guided into stillness. "You are here now," Aaron said. "So you will see more. But understand this. What lies ahead is not a path of conquest or treasure. It is a test of spirit. The Terrans chose silence for a reason. If you continue, the Empire will face questions it may not wish to answer." His image faded, leaving only the calm hum of the Terran ship on their sensors. Commander Vey stood in silence, his crew watching him. He had wanted discovery, and discovery had come, but in a form he had not expected. The Terrans were not ruins or ghosts. They were alive, awake, and watching. And they had spoken his name. The Terran ship remained in orbit, silent yet alive with energy. Its presence filled the void like a quiet command. Commander Vey and his officers gathered in the command hall, staring at the screens. They knew that the figure named Aaron had left them with a message of warning and observation. The humans who had once ruled this space were not gone, and now they had chosen to reveal themselves. For the first time, the fleet felt small. The Empire's vessels, which had once carried authority across countless stars, now seemed fragile, fragile against the calm power of a civilization that had existed long before them. The hum of the Terran ship was not threatening, yet it demanded attention, as though it could measure every thought and action. Then, the pulse returned. Unlike before, it was not simple or rhythmic. It shifted, moving through patterns of light and sound that no one on the fleet had ever seen. The shapes formed spirals, circles, and lines that danced across the screens. Officers whispered, realizing that the pulse was more than a signal. It was a question. Aaron's voice came again, calm and deliberate. Why do humans seek the stars? The question echoed through the fleet. Commander Vey looked around at his crew. Pilots, engineers, and officers all waited for him to answer. Some were nervous, unsure what to say to a civilization that had surpassed every law and system they had known. Vey spoke carefully. We explore because we must. We build because it is our nature. We travel the stars because we are curious. Humanity does not wait for permission to seek what lies beyond. That is why we have crossed into this space. The Terran ship pulsed in response. Light flowed across the panels, brighter now, wrapping around the fleet like a gentle tide. Then a new question came, silent but understood. It was no longer spoken. The rhythm of light asked about their intentions. A young officer named Rila stepped forward. She had been a navigator, always precise with calculations and charts. We do not seek war, she said softly. We do not seek control. We wish to understand, to learn, and to share what we find. The stars hold knowledge, and we hope to honor it. Aaron's ship responded with a wave of energy. The structures in orbit began to shimmer and move, not aggressively, but as if breathing. Lines of light traced the shapes of towers, rings, and platforms. The pulse of the Terran ship and the fleet's vessels merged briefly into harmony. The message was clear, they were listening. The test became more direct. Shapes formed on the screens that resembled paths, puzzles of light and motion. The Terran vessel was showing the Empire a series of patterns. Every officer aboard felt the challenge. It was not strength or speed that mattered. It was understanding. They realized that the Terrans were measuring not their weapons, not their numbers, but the spirit of those who had crossed the forbidden line. The Empire had always measured success by power. Here, power alone was meaningless. Only insight, patience, and respect could answer the questions of Terran space. Hours passed as the fleet worked to follow the patterns. The crew moved probes, adjusted engines, and studied the shifting pulses. Each success brought a quiet glow across the screens. Mistakes caused the light to fade, teaching them subtly that actions had consequences. The Terrans were not punishing. They were guiding. Finally, after long effort, the patterns resolved. A vast lattice of light stretched across the view screens, showing the interconnectedness of the structures, the planets, and the hidden energy beneath the surface. The Terrans had revealed part of their world, part of their knowledge, without exposing danger. Aaron's voice returned, soft but full of presence. You have answered with patience, with care, and with truth. You have not sought to claim, to destroy, or to frighten. You have sought to understand. This is why humans are different from many others. You carry curiosity, yes, but also respect. You carry courage, but tempered with thought. The officers felt a mixture of pride and humility. They had crossed into forbidden space, faced guardians of an ancient civilization, and been tested not by weapons but by their choices and intentions. The weight of this moment settled on them, not as fear, but as responsibility. Commander Vey stood tall. He understood the meaning behind the test. The Terrans were not challenging them to conquer or steal. They were showing the Empire what it meant to hold knowledge and power with wisdom. The test was not finished, but the lesson was clear: strength alone could not open the doors of Terran space. Only humans who could combine courage, patience, and respect could be trusted to witness it. The pulse softened, returning to the quiet rhythm of the planet's guardians. Aaron's ship hovered, silent, as if observing the Empire's reaction. The fleet felt a calm descend upon them. They had passed the first challenge. They looked out at his officers. Their faces showed awe, determination, and understanding. He knew the next stages of their journey would demand even more, but he also knew that humanity's spirit had already begun to earn the attention of the Terrans. In the darkness of Terran space, light danced on the ancient structures. The pulse beat steadily, welcoming, but reminding all who watched that crossing boundaries was never without consequence. The Terrans tested them not to harm, but to teach. And Commander Vey realized that the true journey had only begun. The calm pulse of the Terran ship filled the void around the fleet, wrapping every vessel in a gentle light. Commander Vey stood at the front of his command deck, his hands resting lightly on the railing. The lessons of the test had been clear: the Terrans did not measure power or size. They measured thought, patience, and intent. Now, another stage of their journey was beginning. Aaron's presence returned on the main screens, calm and deliberate. "You have passed the first test," he said. "Now you will see why Terran space has been forbidden for so long. You will see the choice your species must make, whether knowingly or not." With a wave of his hand, the Terran ship activated a series of lights that formed a network of images. The fleet watched as stars and planets appeared on the screens, some real, some projections of worlds they had never known. Cities floated like crystals, rivers shimmered with colors unseen, and forests stretched in perfect harmony. Entire civilizations moved across these visions, their lives unfolding in patterns of cooperation and learning. The officers whispered in astonishment. The Terrans were showing them not only their own history but the potential of life across the galaxy. Worlds that could thrive, civilizations that could grow without destruction, and systems where knowledge and creativity were the measure of success. Vey felt a weight settle on his shoulders. These were not images to conquer. They were visions to understand. "What is this?" he asked. "Are these plans? Are these your worlds?" Aaron's face remained calm. "These are possibilities. We have met many species. Some chose isolation, some chose conflict, and many allowed fear to guide their choices. Humans are different. Your kind has the ability to connect, to create, to trust others across distance. That is why you exist in this space, and that is why the Empire was warned." The officers looked around at one another. They had spent years building fleets, training for war, and expanding the Empire. Yet here, in Terran space, all their measures of strength seemed smaller than the truth of possibility. Aaron continued, his voice steady and firm. "We do not offer judgment, nor do we command obedience. We show you what you could become. These worlds are not yours yet. They are offered only as understanding. Will you continue to grow with care, or will your curiosity lead to harm? This is the choice that defines your place among the stars." Vey felt a strange mixture of pride and fear. Pride for his fleet, for humanity, and for the courage it had taken to enter this space. Fear, because the weight of choice was heavier than any battle he had faced. Every decision now mattered. He turned to his crew. "Look at what we have been shown," he said quietly. "These visions are not a prize to claim. They are a lesson. We have a chance to be more than what we have been taught to be. We can grow stronger not by taking, but by learning and understanding. The Terrans are asking us to prove our spirit." The officers nodded. They felt the truth in his words. Their mission had been one of discovery, and now discovery carried responsibility. The light from the Terran ship pulsed in acknowledgement, as though agreeing that the lesson was understood. Rila, the navigator, stepped forward again. "These images show us what we can become," she said. "If we choose care and patience, if we work with others instead of against them, we can be worthy of this knowledge. We can carry it without harm." Aaron's ship shifted slightly, floating closer to the fleet. "You have learned quickly. Many do not. The choice you make now will define not only your empire but the trust of all who watch. Humans are rare in this regard. You have the courage to seek, the intelligence to learn, and the restraint to honor what is shown. Will you continue on this path? They met the gaze of his officers. Every one of them had felt the test in different ways. Some had feared failure, others had doubted themselves, and a few had imagined what might be gained. Yet now, all felt the same responsibility. They could not take this lightly. He made his decision aloud. We will continue with care. We will honor what we are shown and act with wisdom. The Empire will learn from this, not as conquerors, but as students. We choose restraint and understanding. A calm glow spread across the Terran ship and the structures surrounding the planet. Light rippled through the fleet's systems as if the Terrans were affirming their choice. The pulse slowed, gentle now, steady as a heartbeat. Aaron spoke one final time. You have chosen well. The path ahead will not be easy, but you have shown the spirit that earned the right to witness this space. Remember, strength without wisdom is empty. Curiosity without care leads to destruction. You have the ability to grow, and that is why humanity remains watched, remembered, and honored. For the first time, the fleet felt a sense of peace. They had entered forbidden space, faced the test of the Terrans, and learned a lesson that no battle could have taught. Light danced across the panels, showing the visions of other worlds once more, not as a challenge, but as a gift. Commander Vey felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The Empire had been guided, the fleets had been tested, and humanity had been reminded of its own rare spirit. Terran space was not merely a warning. It was a chance, a choice, and an invitation to grow beyond fear, beyond greed, and beyond the limits of the past. And for the first time, the officers understood why the galaxy had been warned. The stars of Terran space glowed softly, watching, waiting, and offering the path forward. The calm pulse of Terran space filled every ship, fading slowly into a steady glow. Commander Vey stood on the bridge of his command vessel, watching the Terran structures orbit the barren planet. The fleet had witnessed something no one in the Empire had ever seen. The lesson of the Terrans was clear: strength alone did not define greatness. Wisdom, restraint, and understanding mattered more. The Terran ship remained close, a silent guide as the fleet prepared to leave orbit. Aaron's presence returned briefly on the screens, calm and deliberate. You have seen the truth, he said. You have been tested and have chosen wisely. The pulse you have followed is a reminder that knowledge carries responsibility. Use it with care. Vey bowed his head in respect. We will honor what we have learned. The Empire will not forget. Aaron's image faded, leaving only the gentle hum of the Terran vessel. The glowing structures of the planet slowly dimmed, as if resting again after a long watch. The fleet remained in orbit for a final moment, absorbing the experience. Every officer understood that this encounter would remain in their minds forever. As the fleet moved away from the forbidden zone, silence filled the space. This silence was different from the emptiness they had felt before. It was calm, filled with the presence of wisdom and understanding. Vey allowed himself a small smile. They had crossed boundaries, faced guardians, and been shown the potential of their own species. The journey home was quiet but thoughtful. Officers spoke softly among themselves, sharing ideas and impressions. No one claimed glory. No one boasted of courage. Instead, they reflected on what they had learned. Discovery was no longer about treasures or medals. It was about understanding and respecting knowledge greater than their own. Vey spent long hours in the observation deck, staring at the stars that stretched endlessly before them. Terran space had been a challenge, a test, and a revelation. The Empire had always believed that strength and numbers mattered most. Now he understood that curiosity, tempered with care, could change the course of history. When the fleet returned to Imperial space, word of their journey spread quickly. Many in the Empire were shocked. The Forbidden Zone had been crossed, yet the fleet had returned intact. Even more surprising, the commanders brought back not wealth, not weapons, but understanding. Reports spoke of light, patterns and lessons from the Terrans. Scholars debated the meaning, and young officers listened with awe. Vey called a meeting of his senior officers. "We have been shown something rare," he said. "The Terrans did not test our strength or our weapons. They tested our spirit. Every decision, every action, was measured. And we have been found worthy. We must carry this lesson into the Empire. Knowledge must be guided by wisdom. Power must be guided by respect." The officers nodded. They felt the weight of responsibility settle on them. This was more than a mission. It was a call to shape the Empire in ways that had never been imagined. The message of Terran space would guide them in the years to come, teaching restraint, understanding, and the value of curiosity balanced with care. As days turned to weeks, the Empire began to change. Scholars studied the reports from Terran space. Engineers attempted to understand the patterns and pulses left behind by the Terrans. The lessons of patience, observation, and wisdom spread through fleets, academies, and councils. Humanity's spirit, once focused on expansion and conquest, began to learn the importance of restraint and reflection. They often returned to the observation deck, staring at the distant stars where Terran space lay. He knew the Terrans were still watching, still waiting, not as enemies, but as guides. Their presence had reminded the Empire of what it could be if it chose understanding over force. The fleet carried the final gift from the Terrans, knowledge of a language of light, the rhythm of thought and motion. It was a way to communicate beyond distance, beyond machines, and beyond fear. Vey and his crew understood that this gift was a test and a trust. To misuse it would break the lesson. To honor it would open new possibilities for the Empire. Years passed, and the story of Terran space became legend. Explorers told of the pulse that tested their spirit, of the glowing structures that watched from orbit, and of the calm human who had spoken with wisdom older than empires. Young officers dreamed not of conquest, but of understanding, of walking carefully into unknown spaces, and of meeting challenges with courage tempered by thought. Commander Vey grew old, but he never forgot the lessons of Terran space. Every decision, every report, and every council meeting reminded him of the calm light, the pulse of knowledge, and the test of humanity's spirit. The Empire had been warned, and humanity had passed the test. And so Terran space remained forbidden, not as a place of danger, but as a place of understanding. The stars beyond the Empire were full of possibilities, waiting for those who could meet them with wisdom, curiosity, and respect. The legacy of that journey was clear. The galaxy had seen what humans could be when courage was guided by thought, when curiosity was guided by care, and when strength was guided by understanding. The Empire had learned that the true measure of a species was not its power, but its spirit. And humanity, in Terran space, had proven that spirit to be rare, strong, and worthy of the stars.